Daniel didn't go home that night. Instead, he drove to the regional headquarters, a quiet, glass-fronted building that looked harmless from the outside but was the nerve center of every policy and payroll decision for the chain. At 10:15 p.m., he was in his office, not as Daniel the new temp, but Daniel Cross, CEO. On his desk, he spread out everything he could find on Sophie Turner. Employee file, 2 years at the store. Perfect attendance except for 3 days last winter when her son was hospitalized. Performance reviews, consistently, meets expectations, or better, with notes about her friendly customer service. Pay history, barely above minimum wage, with no raises despite company policy to review annually. Manager notes, multiple warnings from Rick for policy violations, mostly about bringing her son to work. Daniel leaned back in his chair, jaw tightening. He'd personally signed off on that annual raise policy. To see it ignored, and then used to corner someone, lit a slow burn in his chest. By midnight, he'd sent 3 emails, one to HR demanding an audit of the store's management practices, one to payroll to calculate what Sophie should have earned if raises had been applied, and one to the operations director about installing employee laundry facilities in every location. But that was just the start. The next morning, Daniel arrived at the store early again, still in his faded jeans and hoodie. He found Sophie already at work, scanning boxes in the stockroom while her son colored in a corner. "Morning," he greeted. She gave him a tired smile. "Morning. You're in early again." "Couldn't sleep," he said casually, setting down a paper bag. "I brought coffee. And muffins." Her eyes flickered with surprise. "That's kind of you." They worked quietly for a while, until Rick's voice barked from the sales floor. "Turner. Front register." Sophie sighed and handed her son the tablet. "Stay here, okay? I'll be back." As she left, Daniel stepped into the aisle, intercepting Rick. "Hey, mind if I cover Sophie's register for a bit? I'm still learning the ropes." Rick eyed him suspiciously. "Whatever. Just don't mess it up." The moment Rick disappeared, Daniel pulled out his phone and snapped photos of the register's cash logs, documenting inconsistencies. He'd have the finance department cross-check them against surveillance footage later. Over the next few hours, he shadowed different employees, quietly listening to their gripes, erratic schedules, no benefits, petty write-ups. It wasn't just Sophie. The problems were systemic. At lunch, Daniel caught Sophie slipping out the back door with her tote bag. He followed her outside, where she was wringing out the same SpongeBob shirt from yesterday over a drain. "Still trying to get it dry?" he asked gently. She nodded, embarrassed. "He doesn't have many clothes that still fit. I'll have to get to the laundromat on my day off, if I can afford the bus fare." Daniel's heart clenched. He wanted to tell her right there and then who he was, and that this nightmare was about to end. But instead, he reached into his pocket and handed her a folded slip of paper. "What's this?" she asked. "Just an address," he said with a faint smile. "Go there tomorrow morning before work. There's something I think you need to see." She looked at him, puzzled, but didn't press. That night, Daniel made 2 final calls, one to a local charity that partnered with his company, arranging something special for Sophie's son, and another to his head of HR, instructing them to be at the store tomorrow at 9 a.m. sharp. By the time he closed his laptop, the plan was in motion. Tomorrow, Sophie Turner's life was going to change, permanently. Sophie showed up to work the next morning with her son's small hand tucked in hers and a puzzled look on her face. She hadn't told anyone about the scrap of paper the new temp had given her. Just followed the address written in neat block letters. To her surprise, it led her to a quiet side street, where a freshly painted storefront sat with a sign that read, "Spark Laundry, Free Community Wash Days, sponsored by Crossmart." Inside, rows of shiny new washers and dryers hummed. A smiling attendant greeted her. "You must be Sophie. We've been expecting you." Sophie blinked. Me? The woman pointed to a basket of neatly folded clothes sitting on the counter. Every piece was hers, washed, dried, and smelling faintly of lavender. Courtesy of a friend, the attendant said. Before Sophie could ask more, she realized the man in the hoodie was standing in the corner, watching her reaction. "You did this?" she asked, half smiling, half confused. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he gestured toward the door. "We're not done yet. Come with me." They walked the short distance to the store, where two people in suits stood waiting. An HR director and a regional operations manager. Rick, the store manager, was also there, looking pale and sweaty. Daniel stopped in the center of the sales floor. "Sophie," he began, "there's something you should know. I haven't been entirely honest about who I am." Her brow furrowed. He reached into his pocket, pulling out a business card and handing it to her. Daniel Cross, CEO, Crossmart Corporation. For a moment, she just stared at the card. Then her eyes shot up to his. "You're the CEO?" He nodded. "I came here undercover to see what life was like for our employees. And I saw more than I expected." He glanced at Rick. "Including management practices that don't meet my standards, or company policy." Rick swallowed hard. The HR director stepped forward. "Effective immediately, Rick will no longer be managing this location. We'll be implementing oversight changes and restoring missed raises to all eligible staff, including you, Sophie." Her lips parted in shock. "Wait, what?" Daniel continued. "We've calculated the raises you should have received over the past 2 years. You'll get a lump sum payment for the difference, and your hourly wage will increase starting today. You'll also have access to full benefits, including childcare support." Her son tugged at her sleeve. "Mom, does that mean you don't have to bring me here anymore?" Sophie's throat tightened. "Yes, baby," she whispered, her voice breaking. Daniel crouched down to the boy's level. "And speaking of you, there's one more thing." He handed him a backpack filled with new clothes, books, and toys. "I figured you could use a few extras." The boy's eyes lit up. "For me?" Daniel smiled. "For you." Sophie blinked rapidly, struggling to find words. "I don't know what to say, it's too much." "It's not enough," Daniel said firmly. "No one working full-time should have to wash their kids' clothes in a sink or worry about losing their job over it. That's on us to fix. And it's going to change, not just here, but across the company." The HR director nodded. "We're rolling out flexible schedules, emergency childcare stipends, and an employee assistance fund for situations like yours." Sophie covered her mouth with her hand, tears slipping down her cheeks. Thank you. I can't believe this is real." Daniel reached into his hoodie pocket one last time, pulling out a small envelope. "This is from me, personally. Consider it a start toward giving you some breathing room." Inside was a check for $5,000. Sophie gasped. I can't take this." "You can," he said gently. "And you should. You've worked hard for years without recognition. This is the least I can do." The store's employees had gathered by now, murmuring in surprise and admiration. Sophie stood there holding her son's hand, a basket of clean clothes, and a future she'd almost given up hoping for. For the first time in a long while, she felt light. Daniel extended his hand. "Shall we get to work?" Sophie smiled through her tears. "Yes, but this time, I think I'll be smiling all day." The smell of industrial coffee and faint detergent hung in the cramped employee break room. Daniel Cross, dressed in faded jeans and a simple hoodie, looked like any other warehouse temp on his first week. No one suspected the quiet man was actually the CEO of Crossmart, a chain of over 200 stores. He had slipped into this branch under the radar after hearing troubling reports about staff morale. Today, he came in early, hoping to observe the store before the rush. But as he pushed the door open, he froze. At the far end of the room, hunched over the stainless steel sink, a young woman was scrubbing a small pile of children's clothes. A tattered SpongeBob t-shirt and tiny jeans dripped with soap suds as she wrung them out. Her back was to him, but her posture spoke volumes: tense shoulders, hurried movements, and a constant glance toward the door, as if afraid of being caught. Everything okay?" Daniel asked softly, stepping inside. The woman startled, clutching the wet clothes to her chest. "Oh, yeah. Sorry. I'll be out in a second." He noticed her employee badge, Sophie Turner, cashier. Her hands were red from the hot water, her sleeves damp to the elbows. "No rush," Daniel said, leaning on the counter. "Those are your kids?" She nodded, embarrassed. "The laundromat near my apartment shut down last month. The other one's across town and I don't get off work until it's closed. My son had an accident at school yesterday, and I didn't want to send him in dirty clothes." She gave a sheepish shrug. "So I thought I'd use the sink during my break before the store opens." Daniel felt a tightness in his chest. He'd sat in boardrooms discussing cost-saving measures, employee benefits, and community outreach, but here was a woman doing laundry in a sink because life had left her no better option. "You shouldn't have to do this here," he said gently. Her lips curved in a sad smile. "You do what you have to. It's not so bad, hot water, some soap, gets the job done." Before he could respond, the store manager's voice echoed from the hallway. "Sophie. We open in 10. You'd better not be." Sophie jumped, quickly rinsing the last shirt. "Please don't say anything," she whispered to Daniel, panic in her eyes. "If he thinks I'm wasting time, I could lose this job." Daniel said nothing, but something in him shifted. This wasn't just about laundry. This was about survival, and the fact that no one at the top really saw what people at the bottom went through. As Sophie slipped past him, carrying the damp clothes wrapped in paper towels, Daniel knew he was going to find out her full story, and do something about it. Daniel spent the rest of the morning stacking shelves in the home goods aisle, quietly watching Sophie from a distance. She moved quickly at the register, always with a polite smile for customers, but there was a heaviness in her eyes that didn't fade. When her lunch break came, she didn't head to the cafe down the street like some employees. Instead, she sat alone in the corner of the break room, unpacking a small container of peanut butter sandwiches and apple slices. She pulled out a coloring book and some crayons from her bag, setting them neatly on the table. A boy, no older than 6, padded in from the back hallway, thin, pale, and with a shy smile. His brown hair stuck out in uneven tufts, like someone had tried to cut it at home. "Hi, Mom," he said, climbing onto the chair next to her. Daniel blinked. He hadn't realized Sophie had her son with her at work. "Hey, buddy," Sophie whispered, brushing his hair back. "You hungry?" The boy nodded eagerly, taking the sandwich with both hands. Sophie turned her attention to helping him color a page with a big, grinning dinosaur. Every few minutes, she glanced at the clock, aware of how fast the break would end. When her son went to the restroom, Daniel took the opportunity to approach. "Your son's here with you?" he asked gently. She gave a short nod. "I can't afford daycare. My shifts get moved around all the time, so it's hard to find anyone who'll watch him. The manager lets me keep him in the stockroom with a tablet when I work, long as he stays out of the way." "That sounds hard," Daniel said. Sophie shrugged. "We make it work. We've been on our own since he was 2. His dad, well, let's just say he chose a different life." She looked down, fiddling with the crayons. "We used to be okay, but rent went up, groceries cost more, and I took on debt after he got sick last winter. It's been one thing after another." Daniel's mind was racing. This wasn't just about one struggling employee, this was a symptom of something bigger. How many others were in her position, invisible to the people making the rules? Sophie glanced toward the hallway, lowering her voice. I've been applying for better jobs, but without a degree, no one calls back. And honestly, this place is all I've got right now. It pays just enough to keep the lights on. Her son returned, holding her hand tightly. Daniel watched them, this tiny family surviving on grit and love, and felt something stir in him. This wasn't going to be just another undercover visit where he wrote a report and left. He wanted to change her life. That afternoon, Daniel worked side by side with Sophie at the registers. The store was busy, customers impatient, phones ringing at the service desk, and carts clogging the aisles. Sophie kept her smile fixed, but Daniel noticed her flinch when a customer tossed a crumpled $20 bill on the counter instead of handing it to her. She gave the change with a polite, "Have a good day," even as the man walked away without a word. By 4 p.m., her son was curled up on a chair in the corner of the stockroom, tablet balanced on his knees. Daniel passed by to restock a box of dish soap and noticed the boy had fallen asleep mid-cartoon, head resting on his backpack. The laundry Sophie had washed that morning was draped over the back of the chair, still slightly damp. The sight made Daniel's jaw tighten. An hour later, just before closing, Sophie's manager, a short, sharp-voiced man named Rick, stormed over to her register. "Turner," he snapped, waving a piece of paper. "This is the third time this month your tills come up short at end-of-day count. I'm writing you up." Sophie's face drained of color. "Rick, I swear I counted everything twice this morning." "I don't care," he cut in. "If it happens again, you're done here. And you can't keep bringing your kid in. It's against policy. You know that." Her hands trembled as she handed over the cash drawer. "Where am I supposed to put him? I can't leave him home alone." "That's not my problem," Rick said coldly. "Figure it out." He shoved the paper at her. "Sign it." Daniel's blood boiled. He knew for a fact the shortage wasn't Sophie's fault. He'd seen Rick pull bills from drawers before, for safekeeping, and then conveniently forget to put them back. But here, in this disguise, he couldn't reveal who he really was without blowing his cover too soon. Sophie signed the form with shaking hands. The moment Rick walked away, she ducked into the break room, breathing hard. Daniel followed. She sat at the table, head in her hands. "I can't lose this job," she whispered. "I'm already late on rent. If I get fired," her voice cracked, "we'll have nowhere to go." Daniel pulled out the chair beside her. "Sophie, listen, what if there were a way to?" She shook her head. "I've heard it all before. People say they'll help, but," she gave a bitter laugh. "It's just the way it is. Some people have it easy. The rest of us," her eyes glistened, but she quickly wiped them with her sleeve. "We just survive." Her son wandered in, rubbing his eyes. "Mom. Are we going home?" She forced a smile. "Yeah, baby. Just a minute." She packed the damp clothes into her tote bag, zipped it shut, and slipped her hand into his. Daniel watched them walk toward the door, the fluorescent lights casting their shadows long and thin against the tiled floor. Something inside him hardened into resolve. This wasn't going to be a quick gesture of charity. He was going to fix this, not just for Sophie, but for every employee like her. But to do it right, he'd need to wait one more day before revealing who he really was. Tonight, he'd dig into her records, her performance history, and the policies that kept people like her trapped. Tomorrow, everything would change.